Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Stranger Things 4 Volume 2, which was just released today, and I just absolutely love this show. And so we're going to be talking about spoilers for this season, as I did with my part 1 episode where we talked about the first 7 episodes. We're going to be talking about the last 2 episodes and the way that this show really did come together, and the fact that, you know, Stranger Things has always done this thing where you have all these different storylines, and I said in my last review that I was kind of reserving some of my criticisms until this, last 2 episodes came out, because you can't really have a giant grasp of the season as a whole and how things come together, especially for Stranger Things, when you don't see the ending and how all these different puzzle pieces fit together. Because for a while, a couple of them really felt very distant, and one of them still does feel very distant, but I think in some ways, these last 2 episodes fixed some of my problems of the season as a whole. So we're going to break this up into my least favorite storylines to my favorite storylines, because, they had split up into 4 different groups. So we're going to be talking about the Russia storyline with Hopper, Joyce, and Murray first. Now, there were a lot of great moments with this storyline throughout this entire season. I loved Hopper's initial breakout. I thought that was a very thrilling sequence, and it was pretty early on. I think it was in episode 4, and that episode just blew me away. I thought, okay, now we're progressing this story, and we're going to get Hopper back to the US. But of course, he stayed in the prison, and then of course Murray and Joyce ended up going to Russia to save them themselves, and then that whole thing just stayed in Russia this entire time. And in this, final 2 episodes, you get to find out that they just simply do not have enough time to go back to meet with everybody else with all their problems, and they don't even know what's going on in that storyline at all. They have no, sense of what is happening with Vecna. They have no idea who Vecna is. They have no idea what Eleven is going through, or Mike, or Will. Joyce is very, very distant from her kids. And then, of course, you have Hopper being absurdly distant because everybody thought he was dead. And even the crew in California, they don't even know that Hopper's alive because Joyce lied to them about where she was going. And so it has so much distance between these 2 storylines. And although they realize that there is something happening, and they know that if they can go back to the prison in these final 2 episodes, and if they can kill, these Demogorgons or hurt the hive mind, then they can possibly help the other crew on the other side of the planet, essentially. But it just felt so distant, and especially the fact that they had no idea what was going on, it just felt very difficult for me to watch the stuff that was happening in Hawkins, and then having to cut back to Russia a few times, especially in episode 8. I was like, I really just want to stay in Hawkins, or I really wanted to stay with 11, especially with 8, and it's just, there's so many things happening in all the other storylines that I was so much more interested and invested in, that this storyline definitely did hurt the most. And so in my previous video, I actually said the California crew was my least favorite group of the entire show, and with them, finally getting to 11, and yes, it took literally, I think they said it was a 9-hour drive, and it felt like it was 9 hours of the show in real time that took for them to get to California, to get to 11, to get to the pizza place where the grand epic finale of this show happened in like a dough freezer in a pizza place. That was just, how great is that? There was a great scene with Will explaining to Mike that he is the heart of this crew. He is the heart of this show. And although I would argue that he's not necessarily the hearts in the show, I think the heart of the show really is with Dustin, and everything that he does in this entire show, it's some of the most emotional stuff. And in this season in particular, the heart of this season was definitely Sadie Sink's character. But I do like the idea with Mike's character arc of him being the heart of this crew, because it really did start with him. He was the lead of the show in season 1, and I really want Will and Mike to have a greater role in season 5, in the final season, because I think their characters were so instrumental and so entertaining to watch in the previous seasons, and this one kind of sidelined them because they were so far away. But now that they're all back in Hawkins, I really, really hope that they give, especially Will and Mike, a lot of great things to do next season, because they are phenomenal actors. Mike had a great moment talking to Elle when she's in Max's mind, and so he's able to give her this pep talk to get her to escape. There was a great acting from him in this episode, and especially Noah Schnapp in his conversation with both Mike in the car and with Jonathan in the kitchen. Those 2 sequences of acting, incredible. And in terms of 11's storyline, this is a storyline that I really wasn't sure of until the end of part 1, and now when you get the climax of it in episode 8, this was thrilling. I wasn't expecting episode 8 to be so just invigorating, because there's a lot of episodes in the season when it came to her character, well, it felt like there was more stuff going on in Hawkins. But when this storyline comes to a head, and you have Papa and you have Paul Reiser's character, and you have this conflict between them, basically pulling an Empire Strikes Back, where 11 is Luke going off to save her friends on Cloud City, and then of course you have, the Yoda and the Obi-Wan saying, oh, maybe she should go to save her friends, or maybe she shouldn't go to save her friends, maybe you need to stay here. And they go a step further to have, Dr. Brenner literally force her to stay at one point, and I was really worried that she wasn't going to break out in that episode. But the whole breakout scene of this thing with the military coming in to kill 11, and then her breaking out with Dr. Brenner, and Dr. Brenner dying in this season, that was some crazy good stuff. The production value of this entire episode was so insane. It's hard to think of where the show started in season 1 with, 11 flipping over this van, and you think that's the whole big action sequence with the car flying in the air, this massive stunt. And then of course in this episode you get to see this helicopter go down with 11 pulling it down to the ground and it exploding in this beautiful shot, some beautiful cinematography of this entire sequence of 11 finally getting her powers back, and will she have enough power to actually take down Vecna. That was some great stuff. And I think in terms of Millie Bobby Brown's acting in this entire show, this season has definitely been her best yet. I think I could say that about every single actor. This season, in terms of acting, has been everybody's best season yet, and Millie Bobby Brown was incredible in this entire sequence. And there were a couple of big revelations that we also got in these last 2 episodes in terms of the plot of the series, with Vecna being one, being Henry, and being the actual hive mind, being behind the mind flayer. All of that stuff was really interesting because, of course, Nancy saw the visions of Hawkins splitting open this giant gate, coming together once all 4 kills from Vecna complete this gate. It's able to open up this massive, essentially just massive X on Hawkins that just unleashes all of the Upside Down. This is the vision that she gets. And of course you have Millie Bobby Brown's character figuring out some other stuff about Vecna at the same time. And of course you figure out that once he went to the Upside Down and saw this thing, he was able to use his powers to manipulate this thing and use it to his advantage. And so he has been behind everything. And that was one of my flaws of the first part of the season, because I like the idea of Vecna being the 5-star general of the Mind Flayer. But since the Mind Flayer wasn't in this season much, I was like, where is the big bad of the show? It's like we're just facing a villain that's kind of underneath the villain that we got last season. So it's like, okay, it feels like we're dealing with somebody lesser, even though he was much more intense and he had much more of a character because he was an actual human being instead of some monster. And so I liked his character because you can do so much more with him, but they were saying essentially that he wasn't the big bad. But now in these last 2 episodes, once you find out that he was actually behind the Mind Flayer, and I think that actually does work. I think you can say, yes, this was made up after the fact, and when they were writing season 3 and season 2, they had no idea this Vecna character existed, that he was actually one controlling these things. But in hindsight, who cares? I don't care, because this entire revelation made this season and the future next season so much more interesting. Because Vecna has been a character that has been so terrifying throughout this entire season, and I was really not thinking that the show would go as far as to take a main character and have a main character have their bones snap in the way that Vecna snaps the bones, and having the eyes implode like he's making other characters' eyes implode in this show. And once you find out in episode 8 that the plan is essentially for Max to be able to take off the headphones, no more Kate Moss, and she's going to essentially be the bait for Vecna so they can pull off their plan of Eddie and Dustin being the distraction in the Upside Down, while Nancy, Steve, and Robin go to kill Vecna when he's vulnerable, in his most vulnerable states. And then of course you have Lucas and Erica defending Max while she's, in danger, and you have this other, the satanic panic whole storyline converging on that house. And this entire finale was so invigorating with everything in Hawkins. And when it came to Max's character, who I said in my last video, and I'll say this again, was the standout of this season, I was so emotionally invested in her character, and it was so heartbreaking to see how far they went with taking her character and literally doing those things that I just said that I had no idea, or I just really did not think they would ever do that with the main character. Seeing Max's bones snap back and seeing her eyes start to bleed, it was terrifying. And then when you get the I guess relief once they're able to get Vecna and she falls back to the ground and you think that she's okay, when you have Lucas holding her body in his arms and her saying that she's not ready to die, that was so difficult to watch. And again, with the performances in the season, Caleb McLaughlin was so good in his fight against that one just douchebag, the character that everybody hates, and I'm so glad he died in the way he did. It was so brutal. But I'm so just like, I was so emotionally invested in their romance, because in terms of all the relationships in this show, and of course I'll get to Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan in a minute, Lucas and Max has been the rock solid relationship that I did not think it would be after seeing season 2. I think their relationship started really strong there, got even deeper in season 3, and it completely crushed me in this season to see how how much Max was just damaged from everything that has happened. Because I think of all the characters, Max has gone through more than everybody else. For one, she lost her brother in the last season, which, I hated that character because you were supposed to hate him, but I did still feel sad about his death. And I really love how in this season, they really did dive into the idea where even if your abuser is the one who's getting hurt or is the one who dies, you still have some emotional connection to them because they are family. And I think this is one very strong theme with Max's character and with Eleven's character, with Dr. Brenner dying as well, because they cause them so much pain. But even though they cause them so much pain, when you lose them, you think you'd be relieved, or you think you'd be happy, or you think that finally this has happened. Maybe that is still the case for these two characters. Maybe they are relieved. Maybe they are happy that they died. But they're still going to feel some emotion about it, and that's going to be so confusing to them. That's going to hurt. It's going to be so difficult to get past that. And I love how they really did dive into that complex emotions that you have for losing somebody that you thought you really did hate deep down. And of course, you have 11 inside the mind of Max fighting Vecna, and that was all great. And that entire sequence of them fighting each other was just so intense because I really thought they were going to lose, and they did lose. Vecna was still able to get his final kill. He was able to, even though we thought it was all happy with Nancy, Robin, and Steve throwing all the fire at Vecna, you thought everything was okay, but when Max still dies and all the gates start opening, yes, they severely damaged and they really did harm Vecna, he still got what he wanted. The gates are open. The Upside Down is bleeding into Hawkins in this amazing final shot of the show, and it is just the terrifying implications of what this could mean for the final season. It's just so awesome. This really was the Empire Strikes Back of Stranger Things. And then we have the other little side groups of this episode, or the finale, which is Steve, Nancy, and Robin, which they were being choked out for like an hour of that episode, and I don't know how in the world they survived that. They were being choked for so long that I guess they have lungs of steel. They were just able to hold in air as strongly as possible, and they were able to survive that. But when they took on Vecna, that was a lot of great sequences, and they were able to all get out alive, which I was convinced that they're going to kill either Nancy or Steve in this episode. And I even thought I saw a leaked image of Robin with her eyes popped like everybody else in terms of Vecna's victims online, so I really was convinced that Robin was going to die. But surprisingly, they all came out unscathed, and the person who didn't come out unscathed, unfortunately, was Eddie Munson, who was a new character in this season that I really was unsure about at first, but then I really came to love his character. And it was so sad to see Dustin. Like I said, Dustin is the heart of this show. Whenever he has such a strong connection with somebody, you want to have such a strong connection with them. Even in season 2, when Dustin had a strong connection with this little demodog, Dart, I cared about Dart when he ran off and didn't, attack them, and he knows that once they shut the gates, Dart is going to die. And just thinking about that was like kind of sad for Dustin. And no matter what Dustin attaches himself to, especially Steve, you are always so worried about that person. When Dustin is holding over Eddie's body and he's saying that this is finally going to be his year, maybe he's going to graduate, he's going to go off and do great things, and then Eddie dies, it was so heartbreaking. Again, the emotional connection that I have with this show is so high, to the point where they've introduced this new character and killed him off in one season, and I was so invested with that. And I hope they don't continue that trend with the final season, and I really don't think they will, because The Walking Dead did that a lot. They would always introduce a new character, and that show has done it so often to a point where you come to expect it in the next season. So I think they've done it twice now. They introduced last season with Alexi's character, and so now they've done it here with Eddie's character. So I think if they did it a third time, then it's something that is of concern, but I don't think they'll do it. I think there's going to be some big main character deaths in the final season, which I was expecting for this season, but I'm glad we did not get that. And leaving off for season 5, of course, we have Max in her coma after 11 was able to bring her back to life, which there's a lot of things they could do with Max's character. For one, all her bones are broken and she's blind now, which is just terrifying to think that she's gone through so much in this series of losing her brother, and then now this, and just all the pain that she's gone through. Like, is she ever going to be happy again? Like, it's so, even the date that they planned with Lucas, of going to see a movie, well, she can't see that movie anymore because she's blind. So I think they can do a lot of cool stuff with her character, whether she's stuck in the Upside Down or she's stuck in a coma of some sort, like Eleven's mother was. There's some sort of thing that they can do to be able to get her out, but she's essentially the new Will of these last 2 seasons, where she's always going to be the main one in danger instead of Will being the main one in danger. But I think they have a lot of potential of what they can do with her character and the journey that she can eventually heal from. And I'm very curious to see what they go with her character. Of course, we have, you know, Jonathan's character and Nancy's character and Steve's character, and that's love triangle that they have there. I really hope that Nancy and Steve do get back together. I think they found a very natural way to get to that point, and especially when Jonathan lied about getting to his new school, I think that is essentially where they're going to go off. And I love that they're really making this love triangle very complicated, not just like Nancy forgot about Jonathan right away, because she still does have feelings for Jonathan, but of course I do think she's going to end up with Steve, especially that heartbreaking, you know, dream that he said that he had with seeing him with a bunch of kids and the wife sitting next to him was Nancy. I really think that that is going to end up happening by the end of the show, hoping that they don't kill Steve, because that would just be heartbreaking. But I do think that they might go in that direction where Steve and Nancy stay together and Jonathan goes off to college and is happy with the memories that he had and happy with the journey that she had brought him on. I just think that's a very natural way to end it. But of course, they could really be heartbreaking and they could kill Steve's character off and have her be happy with Jonathan, because I think that relationship is also very strong. It is very, very well done from season 2 and season 3, and it's just interesting to see that they have so many options with all of these characters. Like I said, I want a lot more with Will and Mike in this final season, especially with seeing the last shots of, you know, seeing the Upside Down unleashing itself and having, you know, Will feel the back of his neck, knowing the presence of Vecna is close, is near, and is ever looming over Hawkins now. This is going to be a very fascinating final season. How is the Upside Down being broken out into the world going to affect the world at large? The scale of the show has gotten insane, and I cannot wait for season 5, which I'm afraid might be in 2 years from now. So, God, it's going to be such a difficult wait. So, what did you guys think of Stranger Things 4 Volume 2? I'm very curious to hear all your thoughts in the comment section down below. And also, the runtime of the last 2 episodes being 4 hours long total, it really did fly by, especially the finale. 2.5 hours just flew by in an instant. I really thought the pacing and flow and the writing of the show, taking its time to really build these characters and build these storylines and having so much care and money put into this, really did pay off, and I think some Disney Plus shows should also maybe listen to that. So if you enjoyed this video, like I said, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, leave a like, and of course subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews just like this one. I have a bunch of other reviews of movies and other TV shows later on throughout this year, so definitely go check all of those out. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope to see you all in my next one.